Close your eyes and imagine this. A land so rich it glows beneath the surface. Gold, uranium, cobalt, diamonds. Enough wealth to light up entire continents. But above that soil lies hunger. A mother walks 10 kilometers for water. A father digs in the earth for minerals he'll never own. A child goes to sleep without food, just a dream in his stomach. This is not fiction. This is Africa. And at the heart of this paradox is a place most of the world ignores. Burkina Faso. From the heart of West Africa, a young leader just challenged centuries of exploitation, not with weapons, but with a signature. President Ibrahim Traoré, the face of a rising generation, has torn through decades of colonial shadows. In a sweeping, unprecedented move, he cancelled every single gold mining license that was born of foreign domination. This wasn't just political. It was personal. It was generational. It was justice.
And before we uncover this historic uprising, if you believe in truth over silence, if you stand for justice and resistance, please subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring stories like this into the light, stories the world tries to silence. What followed wasn't just shock, it was a tidal wave of change, and the world wasn't ready.
Hi everyone! Today, we bring you a story the world media has long kept quiet, and a revolution the West did not see coming. A tiny West African nation, Burkina Faso, rich in gold, uranium, and rare minerals, but ranked among the 10 poorest countries on Earth. How can a nation sit on billions in natural wealth and still face famine, power shortages, and broken schools? The answer is buried beneath years of post-colonial exploitation, secret contracts, and the rise of one man, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. This is not just a political story. It's an economic war, and it's far from over. Burkina Faso produces over 80 tons of gold annually. That gold is extracted by foreign corporations, exported raw, and sold for billions. But in the villages of 𝐀𝐟𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐚, and 𝐒𝐚, mothers boil dirty water, hospitals have no electricity, and school teachers haven't been paid in months. UNICEF reports that over 40% of Burkinabe children suffer from malnutrition, and nearly 1 in 5 live below the international poverty line. And yet, Burkina Faso is the 4th largest gold exporter in Africa. Question: where's the money going? After gaining independence in 1960, Burkina Faso, then Upper Volta, entered a new form of colonization, economic. Like 13 other former French colonies, it remained locked into the CFA franc, a currency designed in Paris and controlled by the French treasury. Key facts: 50% of Burkina Faso's reserves were held in French banks until recently. The country needed French permission to access its own money. Over 75% of its exports, especially gold, were processed through foreign banks. In short, the flag changed. The chains didn't. In the early 2000s, global mining giants entered Burkina Faso with billion-dollar promises of development. But confidential mining contracts signed during and after the colonial transition gave foreign corporations full tax exemptions for up to 15 years, the right to export raw gold without local processing, minimal local hiring requirements, and arbitration rights in international courts, not Burkina Faso's own courts. Investigative note: a leaked 2014 contract with a Canadian gold company revealed Burkina Faso was entitled to only 3% royalty, while the company extracted over $700 million worth of ore. 4 years, these contracts were hidden from the public. Journalists who asked too many questions were silenced. Activists disappeared. Media remained quiet. And the gold? It kept flowing. Over $88 billion leaves Africa annually through illicit financial flows, according to the African Union's high-level panel on illicit flows. Burkina Faso is no exception. Meanwhile, international aid of just $45 billion per year is marketed as generosity. Reality check: Africa is not being helped. It is being drained legally. In 2022, amid this systemic looting and increasing jihadist attacks, a 34-year-old army captain emerged. His name, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Frustrated by government inaction, demoralized by battlefield losses, and angered by the foreign grip on his country's economy, Traoré led a surprise military takeover. Unlike past coups, his message was clear. We are not here to seize power. We are here to return it to the people and take it back from those who sold it. Within weeks, he did what no leader before him dared. Expelled French military forces, suspended all foreign mining licenses, initiated audits of every colonial-era economic agreement. This wasn't politics. It was liberation, written in policy. What happens when a young African soldier decides to fight not with weapons, but with truth? In Burkina Faso, the story is still unfolding. But the first chapter has been written. In revoked contracts, closed foreign bases, and the dreams of a new generation no longer willing to be looted. A quiet panic spread through Western capitals. The phones of mining executives rang without pause. And global media suddenly discovered a new word for rebellion: instability. This is the part of a story the headlines won't show you. This is how the world responded when one African country said no.
Just hours after Traoré announced the suspension of all foreign mining licenses, shares of Endeavour Mining, one of the largest gold producers in Burkina Faso, dropped by 17%. Canadian firms like 𝐒𝐚⁴ began pulling non-essential staff. The French stock exchange flagged Burkina Faso as an investment risk zone. International banks started quietly moving Burkina Faso off their priority lending lists. In boardrooms from Paris to Toronto, there was no confusion. This wasn't about security. This was about losing control. Almost immediately, global news outlets began changing their tone. Where Ibrahim Traoré was once described as Africa's youngest head of state, he was now a military strongman, populist, and a destabilizing force. News headlines shifted. Burkina Faso's rogue leader raises regional fears, The Guardian. Gold contracts in peril as junta targets foreign interests, Reuters. Can the world trust Traoré? The Economist. Western media reframed his actions not as economic justice, but as a threat to democracy, despite widespread public support at home. In the weeks that followed Traoré's reforms, 3 strange events occurred. 1. 2 gold convoys en route to state refineries mysteriously vanished, later found burned in the forest. No groups claimed responsibility. 2. A cyber attack hit Burkina Faso's Ministry of Finance, erasing part of its foreign transaction records. 3. An anonymous leak of internal government documents was shared with international media, painting Traoré's inner circle as anti-Western radicals. The authenticity of the documents remains unverified. Security analysts believe these were not coincidences, but economic sabotage. Behind closed doors, Western diplomats applied enormous pressure on Burkina Faso's interim government. Demands included immediate reinstatement of foreign mining operations, a withdrawal from new economic agreements with Russia and Turkey, a timeline for a democratic transition, meaning elections that favored pro-Western candidates. One EU official, speaking anonymously, said, "If Traoré doesn't cooperate, Burkina Faso will become isolated economically and diplomatically." In response, Ibrahim Traoré made a televised statement. "Let it be known, we are not children. We are not fools. We are a sovereign people, and we will not sell our future for loans or lies."
Multiple sources within Burkina Faso security forces confirmed at least 3 attempts on Traoré's life between November and January. In one incident, a military vehicle and his convoy exploded under suspicious circumstances. In another, intercepted communication revealed a foreign-sponsored plot to replace him with a more cooperative officer. An investigation pointed to foreign intelligence assets active in the region. No arrests were announced, no countries named, but within Ouagadougou, everyone knew. This wasn't just political anymore. It was personal. In retaliation for these attacks, Traoré's government implemented swift defensive measures, revoked diplomatic immunity for several foreign NGO directors, expelled 2 European envoys linked to undue political influence, passed emergency legislation to nationalize any critical infrastructure under threat. He also made one unprecedented move, ordered all international gold exports to be temporarily halted until a new sovereign gold pricing system could be established. This stunned financial markets, but at home, it was seen as a necessary step toward full economic independence. Despite the threats, Traoré's popularity only surged. Young people across the Sahel region, from Mali to Niger, began organizing under a new slogan: "Gold for us, not for them." University students held solidarity marches. Burkinabe diaspora communities in Europe protested outside French embassies. Traoré had become more than a soldier. He was now a symbol of resistance. But not all of the West agreed on how to respond. In Washington, internal documents suggested caution. The U.S. State Department noted, too much pressure on Traoré could accelerate anti-Western sentiment across the region. Meanwhile, France remained uncompromising, quietly lobbying the African Union to condemn the coup. But the AU refused. Too many African leaders were watching Traoré's experiment, some with skepticism, others with envy. The international backlash was fast, aggressive, and deeply coordinated. But Ibrahim Traoré didn't back down. Instead, he doubled down, isolating threats, strengthening internal defenses, and calling for the people to rally. This wasn't just about Burkina Faso anymore. It was about the global system of resource extraction without restitution. And one leader, in a dusty military uniform, was no longer willing to play by those rules. Beneath the headlines and behind the diplomatic language lies a silent system. A financial architecture built not to uplift Africa, but to control it. At the center of this system, the CFA franc, foreign-controlled gold trade, offshore banking, and decades of predatory contracts. This is the economic colonization Traoré is trying to dismantle, and the quiet war it has ignited.
The CFA franc, short for Communauté Financière Africaine, is still used by 14 African nations today, including Burkina Faso. Though often sold as a stabilizing mechanism, the currency was introduced by France during colonial rule and still operates under French monetary policy. Facts you won't see in Western textbooks. 50% of CFA franc foreign exchange reserves were legally required to be held in the French treasury until recent reforms. France had de facto veto power over monetary policy in its former colonies. Currency transfers outside the CFA zone required French approval. Translation: Burkina Faso could not freely access its own money. Even after independence, it was operating inside a financial prison. In addition to the CFA franc, French influence extended into key economic sectors. Gold refining. Most Burkinabe gold was exported raw and refined in Switzerland or France, meaning less value for Burkina Faso. Education grants. African students educated in France were often funneled into elite civil service positions, reinforcing pro-French sentiment in local governments. Debt cycles. IMF and World Bank loans, backed by French influence, forced austerity, privatization, and foreign access to resources in exchange for development. This ecosystem ensured that Africa's wealth flowed outward, while poverty and dependence remained inside. Burkina Faso's gold sector is officially valued at over $5 billion annually. Yet the country holds barely 36 kilograms of gold in national reserves. How? Through mining contracts signed under international arbitration clauses, often written by foreign legal teams, with profit guarantees for companies. Example, in a 2018 deal, a foreign company paid just 3.2% in royalties to Burkina Faso while exporting over $700 million in gold. Add in loopholes, tax exemptions, and resource repatriation rights, and the picture becomes clear. Burkina Faso was not a sovereign economy. It was a resource colony under legal disguise. Upon taking office, one of Traoré's first major actions was the complete audit of all mining contracts signed since 1960. A joint task force, composed of economists, independent lawyers, and university professors, was given 60 days to report back. Findings revealed at least 72% of contracts gave full ownership of extracted resources to foreign companies. Several agreements involved shell corporations based in tax havens like Mauritius and Luxembourg. One agreement guaranteed fixed export pricing, even if global gold prices surged. The result? Burkina Faso earned less than 5% of the total value of its own natural resources for over 2 decades. Traoré called it a war written in signatures, with blood in the fine print. In response, Traoré launched a new national policy. 1. Immediate suspension of all foreign mining licenses pending renegotiation. 2. Creation of a state-owned gold refinery, the first of its kind in the region. 3. Introduction of a sovereign gold reserve fund, allowing the government to store wealth inside Burkina Faso, not in Paris. 4. Reform of the CFA franc policy by aligning with fellow countries considering alternatives to French-controlled monetary systems. He also established trade talks with Turkey, Russia, and China, looking to diversify alliances and independency on France and Western donors. Western media labeled this reckless, but in Burkina Faso, it was viewed as recovery.
Traoré's move sparked a chain reaction. Mali and Niger expressed interest in forming a new West African monetary alliance. Ghana's parliament began discussions on reviewing foreign mining contracts. Guinea and Chad launched investigations into illegal gold flows linked to Swiss banks. A regional currency bloc, free of Paris, is now being drafted behind closed doors. If successful, it could signal the biggest financial shift in West Africa since independence. And Burkina Faso, long viewed as a small player, is now at the center of that movement. But reforms come at a cost. Internal opposition, backed by foreign lobbying groups, began sowing dissent. Former ministers accused Traoré of endangering the economy. Media narratives predicted famine and collapse. Anonymous sources leaked documents alleging Russian influence over state policies. Despite the pressure, Traoré remained firm. We do not fear famine. We fear the silence that let our people starve while our gold fed the world. He restructured the national budget to remove reliance on IMF loans. And for the first time in years, Burkina Faso began funding its own agriculture programs from gold revenues. In schools, children now learn about Burkina Faso's minerals and how they were taken. University programs focus on economic sovereignty and post-colonial policy. New public campaigns encourage citizens to bank locally, buy local products, and support a Burkinabe-led economy. Traoré's revolution is no longer just political. It is cultural. And slowly, the foundations of a truly independent nation, one built on justice, not dependency, are taking shape. What happens when a country refuses to trade its gold for silence? Burkina Faso is showing us, brick by brick, what it means to rebuild a stolen future. This isn't just economic reform. This is economic resistance. When a poor African country cancels colonial mining contracts, closes foreign military bases, and demands economic independence, there is always a price. In this segment, we examine how the West responded to Captain Ibrahim Traoré's resistance, not through invasion but isolation. Suspended aid, frozen trade deals, diplomatic expulsion, and quiet sanctions, all aimed at sending a message. Rebellion will not be rewarded. But instead of breaking, Burkina Faso turned east, turned inward, and turned up the volume.
Following Traoré's contract cancellations and military reforms, multiple Western donor nations suspended aid programs. The European Union froze €190 million in development funds. France halted bilateral military and education programs. USAID paused over $40 million in annual support. These funds were previously tied to good governance and regional stability. But critics argue they functioned as leverage, not help. Burkina Faso economist 𝐀𝐟𝐫𝐢𝐚 Sanfo. This wasn't development aid. It was control disguised as assistance. Though no formal sanctions were declared, Burkina Faso began facing de facto restrictions. Major European banks reduced correspondent relationships. Its supply chains for critical medicine and mining equipment were disrupted. Western insurers refused to cover exports or large infrastructure projects. A 2023 IMF internal report, leaked to investigative media, labeled Burkina Faso non-compliant with preferred investment frameworks, effectively blacklisting it from new World Bank disbursements. The world didn't need bombs. It had blockades and spreadsheets. Within months, the French ambassador was declared persona non grata. Embassies from France, Canada, and the EU scaled down operations. Western NGOs faced audits, closures, or outright bans. Meanwhile, Burkina Faso withdrew from G5 Sahel, a France-backed anti-terror military coalition, accusing it of ineffectiveness and external manipulation. Traoré's statement at the withdrawal announcement: "We will not defend ourselves through a framework designed to defend French interests. If we must bleed, let it be for our land, not their diplomacy." As the West retreated, Traoré expanded ties elsewhere. In January 2023, Burkina Faso signed bilateral agreements with Russia, infrastructure, energy, wheat supply, and military training; Turkey, construction, gold refining technology, and trade development; Iran, medical equipment and agricultural support; China, talks initiated on mineral exploration and tech sector partnerships. Critics called it pivoting to authoritarian regimes. Supporters called it strategic diversification. International relations scholar Dr. 𝐒𝐚𝐥𝐿. The West calls it defiance. Africa calls it balance. Alongside Mali and Niger, Traoré launched a new defense and economic alliance, the Alliance of Sahel States, IS. Key objectives: joint military operations to secure borders, a mutual recognition of economic reforms, shared intelligence to combat foreign-backed destabilization. This was not sponsored by the UN, not approved by the AU, and not backed by NATO, and that was precisely the point. For the first time, 3 African nations were acting independently and publicly to protect one another's sovereignty. Burkina Faso's defense minister: "We are done with handshakes that steal our fingerprints." While foreign investment declined, something unexpected happened inside Burkina Faso. Local agriculture surged, driven by government-led irrigation programs. Gold refining began locally, increasing national reserves by over 400%. Public services digitized, reducing corruption and payroll fraud. Enrollment in military academies tripled, inspired by Traoré's reforms. The message was clear: isolation hurt, but it didn't kill. And in some ways, it helped the country heal. Burkina Faso's model began attracting attention, not just from allies, but from adversaries. Western media ran exposés accusing Traoré of press repression. Leaked intelligence hinted at renewed regime change strategies. Cyber attacks hit multiple government servers in mid-2023, origin unknown. But Traoré's support at home remained strong. His popularity among youth, the largest demographic in Burkina Faso, soared above 80%. In rural towns, he was seen not just as a president, but as a liberator. Internationally, Burkina Faso is now locked in a game of patience. Will the reforms hold? Will the economy stabilize? Will other African nations follow suit or fold under pressure? One thing is certain: the old order is breaking, and a new one, born not in Paris or Washington, but in Ouagadougou, is rising. They tried to isolate Ibrahim Traoré, to break his economy, to freeze his government. But what they didn't count on was resilience. Burkina Faso now stands at a crossroads, not just as a country redefining its future, but as a symbol of what it means to resist, rebuild, and reimagine Africa's role in the world. Burkina Faso is no longer just a name on a map. It has become a headline and a symbol. From revoking colonial gold contracts to forming a regional defense pact, President Ibrahim Traoré has shaken the pillars of Western influence in Africa. But what does this mean for the future of the continent? Is Burkina Faso's revolution sustainable, or will it fall prey to the same powers it now defies? Tonight, in our final report, we investigate how Traoré's bold vision is inspiring a generational shift and igniting a continental awakening.
Across Africa, Traoré's rise has inspired conversations once considered taboo. In Mali and Niger, military governments are openly supporting resource nationalism. In Guinea, there is increasing pressure to audit foreign bauxite contracts. South Africa and Ghana have seen youth-led protests demanding economic decolonization. From the classrooms of Nairobi to the gold fields of Johannesburg, one idea is spreading. Africa must not just govern itself, it must own itself. At the 2024 African Union Economic Forum, Traoré shocked delegates with a speech that drew standing ovations and silent anger from some. We have allowed our diamonds to build other people's empires. We have let our children grow up in darkness while our uranium powered Europe. This is not a mistake. It is a system, and we must be the ones to break it. His words were met with thunderous applause from Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Algeria, but raised eyebrows in Morocco, Senegal, and Ivory Coast, where French influence remained strong. The continent was no longer united by silence. It was divided by awakening. But every awakening has its enemies. Over the last year, multiple plots have emerged targeting the life of President Traoré. In March 2023, an explosive device was discovered under a highway overpass prior to his convoy passing. In June, a former intelligence official was arrested with recordings of private conversations linked to foreign diplomats. Multiple assassination attempts have been linked to private contractors and foreign-backed exiles. International watchdogs believe external actors may be actively planning regime destabilization. Traoré's security chief publicly declared, "This is no longer about leadership. It is about silencing an idea. Alongside physical threats, a psychological war is underway." Western media has doubled down on its portrayal of Traoré. Burkina Faso descending into dictatorship, The New York Times. Russia's puppet president, Le Monde. A democracy hijacked by a rebel soldier, The Financial Times. Yet at home, surveys show Traoré maintains over 70% approval, especially among youth. The real battle isn't in headlines. It's in hearts. And for many Africans, Traoré is more than a leader, he's a challenge to a global script. The world order is shifting, and Africa is not a bystander. Russia has signed long-term infrastructure deals with Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Turkey is building a regional logistics hub for gold processing. China is opening a Pan-African trade corridor connecting West Africa to Belt and road infrastructure. This new geopolitical alignment has a clear goal: a multipolar Africa, one not beholden to Paris, Washington, or Brussels, one that chooses its own allies on its own terms. And Burkina Faso is playing a central role. In a landmark interview aired on state media, 𝐒𝐚⁴ outlined his 10-year vision: a unified Sahelian currency, joint African-owned banking institutions, the end of Western
इब्राहिम
military
ट्रावरे
presence
अफ्रीकियों का
in
नया
all
सदर
West
मुंतखब
African
हो गया।
nations,
अफ्रीकियों का वारिस सामने आ
youth-led
गया,
agricultural
जो
and
उनके
tech
हकूक की जंग
revolutions,
मगरिब की आंखों में
African
आंखें
curricula in
डालकर
African
लड़ रहा
schools,
है और
history
जंग की
taught
तैयारी
not
भी
from
कर
the
चुका है।
perspective of
इब्राहिम
colonizers,
अफ्रीकी
but of the
हजरत बिलाल
colonized.
हबशी रज़ी अल्लाह
Critics say it's
अन्हो को
utopian,
अपना
but
आइडियल
many
मानता
said the
है।
same
उसका
about
कहना
Kwame
है कि
Nkrumah
अफ्रीका
and
अफ्रीकियों
Thomas
का है।
Sankara
उसने
and
अमेरिका
Patrice
समेत
Lumumba,
मगरिब के
all of
तमाम
whom were
सफारतखाने
killed
बंद
before their
करवा
visions
दिए।
could take root.
अफ्रीका के
What makes
वसाइल
Traoré
और
dangerous
मादनियात
is not what he
अफ्रीका के हैं।
controls.
अमरीकी
It's what he
फ्रांसीसी
represents.
कब्जा किसी सूरत
A country
बर्दाश्त
that
नहीं
says
किया
no to the
जाएगा।
IMF.
अगर ट्रंप
A
लड़ना
president
चाहते
who
हैं
refuses
तो हम
to be
लड़ने के लिए
photographed
तैयार
in a
हैं।
suit.
उसने
A
बिल्कुल
movement that
वैसे
believes
ही अल्फाज
Africa's time
दोहराए,
is now.
वी विल
This isn't
फाइट।
just about
मुझे
Burkina
इंतहाई
Faso.
खुशी है कि एक
It's
ऐसा
about the
मुस्लिम
collapse
लीडर
of a
उभर कर
century
सामने
old
आया है
lie
जो मगरिब
that
की
Africa
आंखों में
must
आंखें
always be
डालकर
governed
बात
through
कर
foreign
रहा है।
partnerships,
आप इस बारे में क्या
foreign
सोचते हैं? कमेंट
currencies,
करके
and
जरूर
foreign
बताइए।
rules.
इब्राहिम
Burkina
अफ्रीकी
Faso
का
today
कहना
is
है कि
not
दुनिया
stable.
को हमारी
It is
जरूरत
not
है,
rich.
हमें दुनिया की
It is
नहीं।
not safe
उनका
from
ये भी
internal
कहना
or
है कि वो
external
हजरत
threats.
बिलाल हबशी
But it is
रजी अल्लाह
something rare,
अन्हा की तरह
free,
दर्द
and
बर्दाश्त
that
करने की
freedom,
सलाहियत रखते हैं।
raw,
अगर कोई
fragile, and
हमसे लड़ना
unfinished,
चाहता है
may be the
तो हम
spark
लड़ने
that
के
changes
लिए
the
मुकम्मल
course of
तौर पर
African
तैयार हैं।
history.
इब्राहिम
Traoré
अफ्रीकी के
himself
इस
admits,
जुर्रतमंदाना
I may
बयान
not
को
live to see
तमाम
it,
अफ्रीकी
but I would
ममालिक
rather
में
die on my
खूब
feet
पजीराई मिल रही
than
है
watch
और
my
तमाम
country
अफ्रीकी
crawl on
मुस्लिम
its
ममालिक
knees.
ने
This is
इब्राहिम
not
अफ्रीकी
just a
का साथ
revolution.
देने का
This
ऐलान
is a
भी कर
rupture
दिया है और
between
उनका
what
कहना है
Africa was
कि मैं
told
ला
to be
इलाहा
and what it
इल्लल्लाह
dares to
मुहम्मदुर
become.
रसूलुल्लाह पर
And whether
यकीन रखता
Burkina
हूँ।
Faso's experiment succeeds or falls, one thing is certain: the silence is broken, the spell is shattered, and the battle for Africa's future is already begun. The story of Ibrahim Traoré is not just about one man or one nation. It is about a collective awakening. In a world where Africa has long been treated as a resource warehouse for foreign empires, Traoré dared to say no. From rejecting colonial-era gold contracts to defying international pressure and forging new regional alliances, his journey represents a larger fight: the reclamation of dignity, sovereignty, and truth. While the road ahead remains dangerous and uncertain, Burkina Faso's bold stand has ignited a fire across the continent, and that fire cannot be extinguished. If this story moved you, challenged your perspective, or helped you see the untold side of global politics, then don't let it end here. Like, share, and subscribe to Witty Thinkers, your platform for bold narratives, suppressed histories, and deep investigative storytelling. Your support helps us uncover more truths the world wants to forget. This is Witty Thinkers, where ideas spark revolutions.